Good morning, class. Today is Wednesday, April 22nd, and we are doing the density lab. So this should be the very next page in your Ultimate Science Notebook in our ocean section. Let's get started. For this lab experiment, I am, again, with all lab experiments, I just want to make this very clear. I do lab experiments that have very easy materials that you might have at home. You are not required to do the lab experiments at home. You are more than welcome to if you want to. That's why I explain all the supplies that I use, but you are not required to. You can watch this experiment just as if you were watching me do this in class, and you're doing it yourself in your Ultimate Science Notebook or on a spare sheet of paper. So for me right now, I have one glass that's completely full of salt water, one glass that is half full of salt water that's been sitting for a little bit, and then one glass of regular tap water. So for this lab, the question we're going to be asking is, will adding salt to water change whether or not the egg sinks or floats? Will it change its density? And for our purposes, density is whether something sinks or floats. What is density? Whether something sinks or floats. One more time, what is density? Whether something sinks or floats, okay? So whether something sinks or floats, is that going to be determined by the amount of salt in that water? We're going to find out. So now you need to write a hypothesis or an educated guess. I predict that the salinity of the water does or does not affect if an egg will float because, and explain. So now for experiment parts, pause this video for just a second and then come back when you're ready for me to answer the questions. And so don't just copy down what I'm saying, actually pause, try to answer this on your own, and then replay when you're ready. So if you're listening now, I'm assuming that you've already paused and already tried to fill these in. So the type of data we're collecting here is qualitative. We are not collecting anything with numbers. We're only looking to see whether the egg sinks or floats. Our independent variable, the one thing we're changing, is the salinity, or how much salt is in the water. Salinity is a fancy word for saltiness. So if you really want to knock your parents' socks off during quarantine and show them all the fabulous things you're learning, you could eat a bag of potato chips next time and say, oh my goodness, these potato chips are so high in salinity. Okay, just knock their socks off for me once or twice a day. And then our independent variable, what are we changing? That's the amount of salinity or the amount of salt in each glass. My dependent variable, how will we measure the change, whether it floats or sinks, right? Some constants that we have, what do we need to keep the experiment fair? So it wouldn't be fair if I had different eggs, right? These are all the same eggs. They came from the same pack. We bought them at Walgreens a few days ago. They're the same age, same temperature, same size. One is not brown, one is not. They're the same color. They're exact same egg. My water is all the exact same temperature. I'm using the exact same kind of glass. I'm using the exact same spoon. I know eggs are in short supply right now, so if you are doing this experiment at home, know that you're going to be able to use these eggs, if you're careful, after this experiment is over with. The salt, not so much. So let's turn this back on. Woo, went a little too far. Okay, so we went through that. Those are our constants. Let's do our actual experiment. So the first variable that we're going to do is regular tap water. And all you're doing is coloring in the arrow of whether it floats or sinks. So let's try this out. So I'm going to bend my screen so that we can see. Here's my tap water. Okay. I'm going to take my first egg and I'm going to put it in 3, 2, and actually, I'm being a bad scientist. I should gently lower this in with the spoon because I want to control how my egg is being dropped in. And my egg sinks, right? It sinks all the way to the bottom of my glass. So record that in. Make sure you color in that sinks arrow. The next one we're going to try is salt water. All right. So now I'm going to take my second egg. I'm going to use my spoon. Again, I'm controlling for how I'm placing that egg into the water. What's important too, by the way, let's point this out. My water by itself is a compound, right? Because it's just H2O. It's one molecule repeated over and over and over again. My egg and water in a glass, this is going to be a mixture, right? Because I can see the egg inside of the water. It didn't dissolve completely. My salt water, on the other hand, is a solution, right? It's a solution because my solid totally dissolved into my liquid. It is a physical change. Just some remembering of matter and change. So I'm controlling for how I'm putting this in. And my egg floats, yay! So now we're going to do the last step of our science experiment. We're going to do half and half. Very carefully. This one sometimes works, it sometimes doesn't. I'm going to warn you. We're going to put our egg in carefully. So you'll notice, ooh, it's sinking already. Putting our egg in the solution of water. And when it sits like that, what you can see is it kind of is suspended in the middle of our glass. This one isn't working super well, but our egg is not really sinking or floating because it has the mixture. All right, so let's make sure we answer all of our questions. So, was your hypothesis correct and verified or incorrect and falsified? And respond to the questions, which of the following is true? Salt water is less dense than tap water. Salt water is denser than tap water. Salt water and tap water are equally dense, or the eggs is always denser than the type of tap water. Here's kind of the key of how we think about this. When my egg is floating in my salt water, what that means is my egg, more stuff has been added to my water. My regular tap water is just the water by itself. I've added more mass to the volume, and that's what's made my water, in essence, heavier than my egg. My water is more dense than my egg. In my tap water, my water is less dense than my egg because my egg is sinking through my water. So we say this, and I know we've talked about this before with our layers of the earth, but in science, whatever is deeper is more dense. So if the egg is on top, that means that the water itself is more dense. If the egg is on the bottom, that means that the egg is more dense. So remember, in science, whatever is deeper is more dense, and that's going to really determine. All right, number 2, salt and water is an example of heterogeneous mixture, compound, element, or solution. Number 3, ocean water is an example of, think of all the fishies in the water too. Heterogeneous mixture, compound, element, or solution. Salt water is an example of an element, mixture, compound, or solution. Number 5, salt. NaCl is an example of an element, mixture, compound, or solution. Adding salt to the water changes the liquid by A, even though the liquid doesn't have greater volume, there are more particles in that volume. B, even though the liquid doesn't have a greater volume, there are less particles in that volume. C, when dissolving salt into water, you can take that volume of salt and the volume of water, and this will be the end volume of the solution. Or D, adding salt to the water decreases the mass of the solution. So hopefully you enjoyed our brief little experiment on density. The main idea here I want us to get by is that salt water is going to be heavier than regular water because we've taken that regular water and we've added something to it. Now it's heavier than the water we started with. That makes it more dense. That's why you actually might find it to be easier to float in salt water versus regular regular tap water, like in your bathtub or a swimming pool. It might be harder to float than in like an ocean. And then there's actually some seas like the Red Sea or the Dead Sea that are so high in salinity, they're so salty that you float no matter what you do. So pretty cool how salinity changes water. You can check out this experiment if you want to at home. Otherwise, just make sure you fill it out in your Ultimate Science notebook and that you fill it out on a spare sheet of paper if you do not have your Ultimate Science notebook at home. Make sure you ask any questions, and I will see you for language arts this afternoon. Bye!